Joe is my name. This occurred at the end of the workday following a friendly drink with my coworkers. It was perhaps a bit after 8 o'clock. A young girl emerged from the convenience store near my house just as I was ready to enter. I partially turned my head and followed her with my eyes because of how strongly the shampoo odor was coming from her hair. Yes, I was familiar with her. The apartment complex across from mine was where she resided. We had never spoken words, but if we chanced to cross paths in front of our flats, we would nod. Her hair was short and slightly flipped at the ends. It looked like a mullet, but I'm not very good at figuring out women's haircuts. I assumed she was in her early 20s and a college student. She had a type of gentle, friendly, and adorable face, but she wasn't particularly showy. She usually wore nice clothes, but that evening she was wearing a tracksuit. Unusually, she staggered down the street at night, weighed down by the plastic bags she carried in both hands. After I finished at the convenience store and entered the alleyway to my apartment, I saw her not far ahead, standing still with 2 plastic bags at her feet. One of the bags had ripped open under the weight of its contents. "What's wrong?" I asked. When I called out, she looked up at me with a pleading expression. "It's just heavy," she said. Following her words, I looked at the bags on the ground. Each bottle contained 42 gallons of mineral water, 8 in total. I thought it was a rather hefty purchase and decided to lend a hand. "I'll carry half of it. You live in that apartment building over there, right?" "Yes, but are you sure?" I'd assured her it was no problem, although I was a bit bothered by the overpowering smell of her shampoo. As we walked along carrying the bags full of water bottles, I asked about the situation. About an hour ago, she had been using the shower at home. Just as she started washing her hair with shampoo, the hot water stopped. She had only planned on showering, so the bathtub was empty. She wiped off the shampoo studs with a bath towel as best she could, then stepped out of the bathroom in her tracksuit. So, she hadn't rinsed off the shampoo. That's why the smell was so intense. I nodded in understanding, feeling strangely satisfied with her explanation. Despite this, her story continued. Just as she stepped out of the bathroom, the doorbell rang. It was her neighbor, checking to see if her water was also out. It turned out the water was out in all the apartments, and everyone started making a fuss. Someone called the property management company who managed the building. When they came to check, it turned out to be a problem with the water tank. They called a professional to repair it, but it couldn't be fixed that night, and so everyone had to spend a night without water. That's why she had to buy bottled water at the convenience store. I helped her carry the water bottles up to her room. She thanked me repeatedly, looking quite embarrassed. That's quite a disaster. Must feel awful with your hair full of shampoo. At my words, she put her hand on her own head. Yes, so after buying the water, I thought I'd boil some and wash it out. As she said this, something flashed in her mind, and her eyes lit up. Right, there's a spot on the street past the convenience store, isn't there? Maybe I'll go there. It's been a while since I last visited a spa. I wouldn't. I nodded. I turned on my heel to leave and then remembered something. I remembered and turned back to her. That spot's closed on Tuesdays. Her hand, which was inserting the key into the lock, suddenly stopped. Then she looked at me with her mouth gaping. There weren't any other internet cafes or the like where she could use a shower in this neighborhood. If you'd like, you can use mine. It's old, but I keep it clean, so it's not dirty. She lived in what you might call a fancy designer condo. In contrast, I lived in a 40-year-old, 2-story wooden apartment building. At best, it was of a retro design, but simply put, the decay was severe. It was a rickety old apartment, but I liked it. There wasn't any particular inconvenience, and the location was good. My room was on the 2nd floor, and it got decent sunlight. And above all, the rent was by far the cheapest in this area. I even doubted whether it was a crime scene when I first moved in. The layout of the room was such that, As soon as you entered the front door, the kitchen, about the size of a small dining room, was to the right, and a back bathroom unit was to the left. There was just one larger room in the back. She was a little hesitant about my invitation, but losing to the unpleasant feeling of her hair, she eventually came to borrow the shower. She came to my room with a fearful look on her face, looked around with a curious look, and then entered the bathroom. Immediately, I heard the sound of hot water running and the pitter-pattering from the shower. I felt as though I was listening to a sound I shouldn't be hearing, so I turned on the TV in a hurry. "Thanks to you, I feel refreshed," she said. "I'm glad I could be of help." Exchanging these words, I saw her off from the doorway. A few days later, in the area where my apartment is located, there was a prior notice that, due to power supply tightening, a planned power outage would be implemented for about 2 hours from around 7:00 p.m. It may be inappropriate for me to say this, but I was looking forward to a little taste of what a power outage would be like, if only for a couple of hours. And at exactly 7:00 p.m., it became pitch dark outside the window. The lights in my room remained on, wondering what was going on. I went outside of the apartment. It turned out that even though this whole area was said to be affected, my apartment was excluded. The power outage had occurred only up to the other side of the narrow lane. I was left a bit surprised, not knowing whether to be happy or disappointed. Then she came out of the condo across the street, which was affected by the power outage. When I greeted her, she bowed her head and said, "Thank you for the other day." Then she sighed and added, "It's a power outage this time. It's so annoying, and I have an exam tomorrow." She had heard the notice about the planned power outage, but seemed sure it would be canceled. Still, taking the previous water outage as a lesson, she has stored some water. In condos where water tanks are used, water is sent to each room using electricity. So, if there's a power outage, water will also stop. When the power went out and the lights turned off, she thought she would try to imagine the exam questions in the dark, almost like a meditation. She planned on making tea to calm down, but her place was fully electric. Not only did the lights not turn on, but she also couldn't get water or heat it. Far from calming down, she became frustrated and decided to go to a fast food restaurant near the station to study. I was about to tell her that my room still had electricity and I could heat water for her, but I decided not to. Instead, I said, "Well then, good luck. Take care," and saw her off. The next evening, as I was returning from work and about to leave the station, I saw her arguing with a station staff member inside the ticket gate. "Good evening. Is something wrong?" I asked. "Oh, Joe," she said. I didn't remember introducing myself to her, but maybe she had seen my nameplate when she borrowed my shower. "I don't have enough money for the train fare," she said. "How much?" I asked. She answered with a face that looked like the world was ending. 80 cents. 80 cents. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. But anyway, I lent her the money. She successfully exited the train station and headed home with me. "I think I dropped my phone on the train," she said. She always went cashless, paying with her phone wherever she went. Of course, she carried a bit of cash too. But that day, she had just finished her college exams and had an early dinner with friends to celebrate. The restaurant only accepted cash, so she used up most of what she had. She used her phone as a train pass as well, so she could board the train, but after she got off, she realized her phone was missing and couldn't get out of the station. When she explained the situation to the station staff, they checked for lost items but told her, "We have no matching reports yet. You can either wait a little longer or hope the train crew finds it when the train goes back to the garage." Regardless, she had to pay the train fare. She honestly reported the station where she boarded instead of saying it was the next one over, which resulted in the fare being 80 cents more than what she had left in her wallet. The next morning, she came to visit me out of breath as I was leaving for work. She had withdrawn cash from the ATM at a convenience store the previous night. Since she didn't have a landline at home, she searched for a public phone in the neighborhood and contacted the railway company. She found out her phone was stored as a lost item. "I'm going to go pick it up now," she said, running off. Then she came back as if remembering something and paid me back the 80 cents I had lent her. Watching her leave, I couldn't help but laugh. I felt like I had become her anchor or something. The next weekend, while I was shopping at a nearby supermarket, I spotted her at the next register. She was unbothered, paying with her phone again. After checking out, I approached her at the bagging station and spoke to her. "Hello. Are you shopping?" I asked. She looked surprised for a moment, but, recognizing me, smiled and said, "We've been running into each other a lot lately, haven't we? Maybe we just didn't notice each other before. We might have been passing by each other all the time." We left the supermarket and walked home together. "Lately, I've been really unlucky," she said. "Remember the water cut off and the scheduled power outage the other day?" And dropping my phone at the train station. She looked up at the sky, shaking her shoulders in a bored manner. "I'm really fed up. I failed my college exam, made a mistake at my part-time job, and got scolded. And the other day, when I was walking on the street, I even got pooped on by a crow." I chuckled through my nose. Hey, we all have times like that. Suddenly, she got an idea. "Hey Joe, can I use your kitchen today?" "Okay, but why?" I asked. She answered that the reason she hadn't been lucky lately was because of the apartment she was living in. Since she moved there, she felt her luck had turned bad. "I'm not good at cooking, but I'm good at making omelets," she said. "But the apartment I'm living in is all electric with an induction heater. I can't make an omelet the way I want to." I thought blaming it on the tools was a bit much. "Maybe it's a kind of exorcism," she added. "If I can make a good omelet with gas, maybe I'll move to a place that's not all electric." I didn't expect the word exorcism to come out of her mouth. "Sure, why not? Give it a try. I'll taste it for you." The omelet she made turned out overcooked and hard, far from delicious. Several days passed. A major hurricane was approaching, and the company ordered us to finish work early. Just after 4:00 p.m., I left the office and got on the train for home. As predicted, the weather was threatening, with strong winds and ominous rain clouds hanging in the sky. I did some shopping at the usual supermarket and hurried back to my apartment. When I got there, she was sitting alone, squatting in front of my door. "What are you doing? Is something wrong?" I asked. She looked up with a sad face and told me that a group of friends from her college club, who she was very close with, had organized a mixer a few days ago. She found out today that she was the only one not invited. "I feel left out," she said. "What a foolish thing to worry about," I thought, but then again, that's youth for you. I laughed it off. Anyway, the wind is getting stronger, and it's starting to rain. The storm is coming. You should go home, or would you like to come in? To my surprise, she said she'd like to come in. The storm was closing in, and the wind and rain were intensifying. My 40-year-old, poorly constructed apartment was making all sorts of creaking and groaning noises. She looked anxious the whole time. She probably had never heard such noises in her fancy apartment. "Are you going to eat with me? I'm making fried rice for dinner," I called out from the kitchen. She happily accepted the offer and came over. I placed the frying pan on the gas stove, added some oil, and started tossing in the ingredients one by one. With a quick backward pull, I tossed the fried rice in the air with the pan. "Wow, you're good. Can I try?" she asked. I handed her the pan. She was very motivated, but when she gave it a shot, the fried rice didn't budge. She tried again, putting more strength into it, and this time, the fried rice leaped out of the pan, scattering everywhere. "Oh no, it spilled out," she said. "Let me do it," I offered. Gently pushing her to the back of the room, I resumed cooking. Later, we sat across from each other at my small table, eating the fried rice. Thanks to the storm, The room was noisy with all the creaking and groaning. "Have you lived here long?" she asked. "Well, I'm about to renew my lease for the third time, so about 6 years. Almost 7, actually. Why do you ask?" I responded, looking up at her. She seemed lost in thought. Then she pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It was a horoscope app. It says, "A time of many troubles. Reconsidering your current environment might be beneficial." "Do you believe this kind of stuff?" I asked. "Well, not necessarily, but it's kind of on my mind. Some things do come true," she replied. Now I understood what she was trying to say. She had previously mentioned that her recent streak of bad luck might be due to her apartment. Now, this horoscope suggested she reconsider her environment. Naturally, the first thing that came to her mind was her apartment. The other day, it was an exorcism. Now it's a horoscope, I thought. She was surprisingly superstitious. "So, are you thinking of moving?" I asked. "How did you know?" "Are you a clairvoyant?" she responded. "What? Clairvoyant?" I laughed. "Well, why not? A fresh start can be a good thing. Maybe you should consider moving," I suggested. "I guess so. Maybe I really should move after all." She seemed conflicted, but I thought that if she did move and disappeared from the apartment across the street, I'd feel lonely in a different way. She said she was about to go home, so she started putting on her shoes in the entryway. The peak of the hurricane seemed to have passed, but it was still pouring rain outside. "Thanks for the fried rice." "Hold on, I'll walk you home." With that, I grabbed my coat and quickly put on my shoes. Even though I said I'd walk her home, her apartment was right across the street. The width of the street was only about 13 feet. It only took a few steps to get to the other side, but I wanted to walk her home. We descended to the first floor of the apartment. I opened the coat I was carrying, and we both held it above our heads like a makeshift umbrella. "Let's go then." 1 step, 2 steps. Rainwater pooled on the road, splashing up. 3 more steps, and we can cross the road. I shouted, holding her shoulder. "All right, let's go for it." "Yes. On your marks, get set, go." Hop, step, jump. We landed in front of her apartment. Then she pulled my hand and dragged me into the entrance. "I've decided. I'm going to move." I remarked, somewhat remorseful that I had urged her to relocate. "Huh, so you've decided." "May I have your contact information?" she inquired. She stored my cell phone number in her smartphone after I gave it to her. She said, "I'll email you later." I nodded silently and bid her farewell. She left the apartment across the street a month later. I didn't feel lonely as I had anticipated when I couldn't see her face anymore. Rather, we began trading emails often throughout the day, which made me busy.